Good day. I'm Red Hawk, and I'm coming to you from the deep end. I'd like to welcome all our listeners. And I'd love to hear from some of y'all. Write me at redhawkthedeepend@gmail.com. Especially some of you in Europe and Africa, that would be kind of cool. So anyway, today, we've been on this journey from nothing itself to the evolution of being, to the evolution of life, to the evolution of self-consciousness. And it's easy to miss what is right in front of us sometimes. I mean, seriously, it's cold out. I come inside, it's warm. It's 106 degrees out. I come inside, it's cool. Our comfort, our constant ability to be fed and clothed, our ability to respond to suffering, and the list goes on and on. All of this is due to this human process of bringing about new ideas, methods, products, services that have a significant and positive impact and value. And all of this being turned into these tangible outcomes that improve efficiency, effectiveness, or address some unmet need. The word, of course, that sums all this up is innovation. Innovation. And when we look at innovation, I don't know about you all, but I'm a contemplative, so every week I get this ability to contemplate. And I think of this week, the people who came up were Thomas Edison, Steve Jobs, Nikola Tesla, Bill Gates, Benjamin Franklin, Leonardo da Vinci, Alexander Graham Bell, Madame Curie, the Wright brothers, Galileo, Richard Feynman. Oh, the list, come on, it goes on and on. Innovators. And I mean, I want us to see that, regrettably, defense is one of the places that innovation happens the most. When Leonardo da Vinci was trying to find sponsorship and was appealing to different suzerainties, if you will, his resume was about his ability to create new war weapons, to create new defenses. And at the bottom of his resume, he said, also, I paint and sculpt. Now, I'm not going to get into the negative stuff of the defense side, but I want us to see that innovation is innovation and that there's something in us that causes us to do this. Our human innovations, I mean, they've created a life that's easier, more secure, with less suffering, less poverty, a higher quality of life. Today, we've created the greatest innovative machine in history. And it started in 1958 after the Soviets put up a satellite in 57. It was Sputnik. President Eisenhower created ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is this partnership between government, universities, and industry. Again, the most powerful, innovative engine in history. Now, in 72, it was turned into DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project. And then in 93, it was turned back into ARPA because they realized so many of the things they were discovering were reached further than their military applications. And then it got turned back into DARPA and ARPA and back to DARPA one more time. I can't remember the dates. You think an innovative organization would be able to settle on something, but maybe that's just some built-in irony. Now, The Economist, if you don't get The Economist, I recommend at least going online and reading some of the articles. Amazing, to me, the best magazine there is. They also have very small fonts, which makes it difficult for some of us older people to read. But The Economist called DARPA the agency that shaped the modern world. Think about that. They came up with weather satellites, GPS, drones, stealth technology, voice interfaces, personal computers, the internet, and the list goes on. And they can at least claim to be partial credit for all of these, if not complete credit. DARPA has inspired governments from around the world to launch similar R&D agencies. And the world we live in, was born of these innovative processes. And I want us to see that, these processes are just so important. That's part of what we do at the Deep End, look at things and processes that life cannot do without. We are connected and enriched by these ongoing processes. And my point is that innovation is integral to self-consciousness. And one of the payoffs, if you will, for not just personal innovation, but group innovations to do is and this is one of the purposes, DARPA basically said what we want to do is high risk, high gain, far out. That's their words, by the way, basic research. Look up some of the defense industries that are out there. Just go to the top 10 defense contractors and then go to any one of their sites and look what they're working on. And that's only the stuff they can talk about out loud. It's an amazing contemplative piece into the root work and branch work of how innovations flow into specific outcomes, if you will. Regrettably, many of those outcomes are more creative ways to kill, but many of them are also ways to protect us. Now, we've gone through these different orders of evolution on the Deep End. Again, from being to life, and life to self-awareness. And we've talked about 3 essential processes: complexification, differentiation, and semi-permeability. And we've entertained what is now happening with these processes in human life. If each of them gave rise to a higher order of life, if you will, all the way to self-awareness, what are they doing with us? And I think this is where I get somewhere between sci-fi-ish and philosophical and very positive. Because with innovation, especially now, we have AI, and beyond where our innovation is taking us. Where is it? Taking us to the stars, taking us to inner space in terms of understanding how to move within our neurological systems in some new ways, getting rid of mental illness. That's been projected in the next 30 years. Think about that. So I'm going to give you my best guess. I think AI and a whole series of other technological innovations are going to make the workforce smaller and smaller. And the only people who are going to work are probably going to be creative people and scientists and innovators. The rest of us will have a lot of leisure time on our hands. And I think what's going to happen is at first there'll be the hedonists, those who just go for comfort. Hey, man, I got food, I got a place, I can go party a little bit, I got enough TV and movies, I could just sit here all the rest of my life and be perfectly happy. And that's okay. However, the stories are going to start bending into being part of something greater. And the rest of us will start seeing ourselves as innovators. Everybody an innovator. Each and all, this little engine of creativity that can take us a little bit further, a millimeter further into a new world with less suffering, more efficiency. Everybody has a place to live. The whole package of justice and everything. This is I'd say it's a pipe dream, but I haven't been smoking anything. So it's a dream that I have, born of all the sci-fi I've read, of my scriptural understanding of every scripture, and how they talk about, in the end, things coming full circle to a completion of health and wholeness. So over and over, I can't help but in my deepest being find this health and wholeness, this place of justice, as a place that we will land. And after that, we'll start getting a sense of the next step of evolution. And maybe it'll be a lot more intentional because we'll be much more along. So, innovators, my fellow innovators, Bob Hayes is coming to us from Florida, and Marianne from Spokane Valley. Bob, I'll start with you. I just threw a whole lot out there. What say you?
Well, innovation is a very interesting topic because it sits right in that balance between the individual and the collective, or culture, if you want to call it that. People innovate for a lot of different reasons, mostly out of their own self-interest. And you talked about sponsorship, how Da Vinci was sponsored because he could invent war machines. Well, he was also sponsored because he could glorify the church. So he had these two different sources of sponsorship, and he was able to access them because he was, because he was looking for his own self-interest. He needed to feed himself in order to be able to do what he wanted to do. And we see that with DARPA. So many things happened in DARPA that Eisenhower and the people who were sponsoring it initially had no idea. I mean, look at the internet now. They had no idea what was going to happen with the internet. It was originally just a way for different scientists to communicate with each other and share their ideas, share their research findings. And then it became a worldwide highway where ideas were exchanged. Some of them are not that great, but some of them are incredible. So I guess the point I want to make is that innovation goes beyond the control of the innovators. They become part of a feedback loop that bounces between their original ideas and what society, what culture does with those ideas. And they come back, and sometimes the innovator doesn't have any idea that it was going to go in that direction. And if they're smart, they can jump on that wave and move it forward. Some of them get discouraged by it and say, well, this isn't what I wanted to do. So again, like most things having to do with humanity, we're not in the control that we think we are.
Yeah.
The universe is moving along using the laws that it has set up, complexification, differentiation, so forth, and it's moving along beyond our ability to control it. And we just have to try and find that wave and try and jump upon it the best we can.
And I think that's why one of Eisenhower's brilliance, creating a partnership between industry, universities, and government. That university piece is huge because basically who's interns on those projects? Students, young people. And that, maybe they'll drop out and invent, make a home computer that's more usable and effective and efficient. So, Marianne, what say you to all this innovative talk?
Well, I think that having these entities, these places that pure research can happen, and to begin with as an advanced research partnership for the specific purpose of learning and researching and being innovative and creating things. But then as we humans do, and you mentioned Da Vinci, going back centuries, we have to figure out a way to make money from it, right? And so there has to be this financial component. And then to put it into the Department of Defense, well, there's some funding, right, to be able to do this. So it's like this pure research has to be couched in these different structures, but it still allows for innovative discoveries and finding new ways to do old things and finding ways to open up our mind. And I agree 100% that a lot of times you don't know what's going to come out of this. You don't know where these things are going to go. You don't know where your discovery is going to be taken by other people. But the idea that we are innovative creatures, and I would kind of my mind always kind of goes back down to our own individual everyday lives. When we think of these scientists and researchers and the advancements that they're making on these large scale that affects everyone, but I kind of go back to even in our own everyday lives, we have to be able to be innovative. We have to be able to find new ways to do old things, or find ways to do things with limited resources, or be able to figure out how to get the resources to do those things in our own lives. And so there's this the spirit of innovation, I think, that is central to all of us as human beings. And we're always on this path of trying to create a life that we want. And these big projects, these big things are groups that come together to create a future that we can all be thriving in. So, yay, innovation.
Yeah. And I think, as a little anecdotal side note, I always said, necessity is the mother of invention. Laziness and comfort is the father of invention. It's like it was a woman actually who invented the dishwasher because her maids kept chipping the china, so she washed it herself and she chipped it. She said, there's got to be a way to wash my china without it. And, so the way innovation happens, and, you say you're not in control. Some people are in control of their innovations. Salk, when he got the polio thing, no, nobody charges for this. It's out there. It can have an effect. The person who invented the insulin, I can't remember his name, who discovered it, drug companies wanted to buy it, and he goes, no, everybody needs to have this if they're sick. So I think although we don't control it, we can aim it into the world in a way that's really good. And I think of the way that a Bill Gates or Stephen Jobs took the innovations that came out of DARPA/ARPA and turned them into making our lives easier. I think about my phone all the time. This podcast is being recorded on my phone. There is greater computing power in my phone than NASA had when they sent humans to the moon. With the innovations, and I guess one of the things I want to come out of this podcast is just stop for a second and look what we're inside of. We can go out in the woods and we can go, wow, this is amazing. All the little pieces that are making this up. However, at the same time, go into a city and see what's going on. Governing is not easy. Making all this happen, from the supply lines to the communication to the energy to the poop that's got its own system. It's an amazing thing that's going on, and every single point in that reality, that social, cultural ecosystem, if you will, was innovated by a human being. And Marianne, I think you're nailing it. Each of us are little innovative engines, and we're doing it every day. I started noticing some of my late life innovations when I couldn't do certain things and I had to innovate workarounds. Well, it turns out workarounds are an old people term that I never knew until I became old. So I think we're all innovating all the time. I think the big challenge for any of us is to be intentional with it, try new stuff, get out there, cook, take up an instrument, play tiddlywinks. Bob.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to give the impression that we have no control at all over innovation, because there are innovative ways to control innovation. I'll give you one example. I worked for the Department of Defense my whole career, and I was in research. Now, that very innovative idea, I had no idea where it started, somewhere in Congress when they passed the legislation for funding research. they divided it into different research areas: basic research and applied research, and actually basic, exploratory, and then applied. And they have different funding categories that don't cross over. So if you want to get funding for basic research, you go through the basic research, and it's there for that sole purpose. Once you've gotten somewhere, then you can go and get funding to do something with it. So that little bit of innovative legislation to control the funding of research was an innovation in and of itself. Now, still, we get down the road, and things happen that we don't control.
Yeah.
Talk about your telephone or your phone. People don't even know what a telephone is anymore. It's a hand computer, if you will. Nobody 10, 15 years ago thought that when we had these little handheld computers that we would have to struggle with whether or not we would let our children take them to school. And that is something that's happening just as we speak. People are struggling with the idea of how do we control this innovation?
Okay, and now you're talking about a different order of innovation, social innovation. How do you socially integrate the technological stuff into the social stuff in a way that does not impede the social stuff, but can somehow enhance it and enrich it? And that's the stuff I see us participating in every day. All the stuff with gay folks and all that, it's too much. And here's the thing. Revolutions happen, that backlash happens because the innovations are too great for the people to assimilate at the time. And so there's a tendency to go back to the good old days, which never really existed except for a few people. There's this whole thing, a backlash against innovations. And I'm reading about some of that with the original Luddites, who have been greatly misinterpreted, by the way. They weren't really against the technology. They were against the low wages for those who learn the technology. But that's a whole historical controversy that I got caught up in this last week on another front. And the whole concept of what human beings are doing intrigues me so deeply. What is, if all of nothing became everything and everything became life and life became self-aware, what is self-aware reaching for? And these are the places at the deep end that are intriguing, mystifying, confounding, and totally a delight to entertain.
Well, and it's so interesting too because of this idea of how these innovations are changing our lives. It has changed our family dynamics. It has changed our social dynamics. We live in a surveillance society now, and when I was growing up, I couldn't imagine my parents knowing where I was at every single minute. And now parents would want their kids to have that phone with them all the time.
My parents didn't want to know where we were. Don't tell me about it. It'll implicate me.
Right. Yeah, and it's just these different ways of adapting and being in the world, and that takes innovation for us to be able to adapt to these dynamics. And Bob, you mentioned not having those phones in school. And so it's kind of like, okay, how do we adapt this to a optimal environment for our kids? And we'll have to get some innovation there to figure that out, because we have become so dependent on some of these things.
I think that's right. And what you're talking about is something that is also integral to every stage of evolution in life, and that's adaptability, being resilient, being elastic. And this is part of, those who are most resilient and adaptable, they are the ones that are going to live the longest. So how do we build that in? And I think part of our problem is we get stuck. We get stuck, and our adaptation is taking too much. I can't do this. A lot of older people, my dad's generation, could not do the computer. My dad got put on an old people's magazine as somebody who was learning how to use computers. I really respect that in him. He was always trying to catch the next thing. He did to some extent. And I think that that's what life is asking out of each of us. And I think that's, don't keep your adaptations to yourself. And Bob, this is something from your opening statement I get, that, it's part of a collective. We're all trying to process all of this at the same time. And where to next? So we're actually coming into our final comments. We got a little bit of time. So, Bob, final comments?
Well, as usual, both Marianne and you have pulled me a little bit down from the clouds and made the important point that we're each capable of innovation, and we're really innovating our own personal lives all the time. And I think that we need to give ourselves some credit that we all have the ability to become innovators. We all have the ability to change our life patterns in ways that are healthier and that contribute more. And those feedback loops can be very, very positive also. So I think that, again, it's important for each and every one of us, all of our listeners, everyone we encounter, to stop and think about how incredible it is that we have this self-awareness, that we have the ability to become innovators in our own lives.
Yeah, amen. Marianne, final comments?
I think the whole idea of being able to adapt is crucial. We tend to get nostalgic and want to go back to a simpler time, to a different time. Well, we can't go back. And so you do adapt. For your own survival, you have to learn how to adapt. And you adapt through being innovative. I mean, look at companies that didn't adapt on a business scale. Blockbuster, didn't they have a chance to buy Netflix at one point? And no, we're going to stick with this. And it's the same thing for us. We either adapt to the changing world that we're living in, or we're going to become archaic and maybe go sit in a corner somewhere. So, yeah, innovation, and we all have the ability, I really believe that, to be innovative in our own lives, to figure out what to do next.
Amen. And those parts of life that did not adapt, they're called fossils. They're bones buried in the sand. They're not here. And that's part of the harsh reality of life, that human beings now have to adapt. And we not just have to adapt to nature, because we've learned to do that fairly well. We can do it. How do we do it in a zero-sum energy world where we're not burning up fossil fuels or polluting? Those are innovations that the human family is right on the tip of. We're working on it. And I say we because I feel connected to the collective, and that matters a lot to me. It creates a hopefulness in me. And of course, there are places that create new insecurities and vulnerabilities, but at the same time, there is an overriding piece that is, to me, quite amazing. So where do we go from here? The whole deep end came out of the WTFs, and I'm not going to spoil this podcast with profanity. I'll wait till next week and do that. The whole concept of getting back to why anything at all, to the real metaphysical why of things, is, it's anxiety inducing and it's delight making. And I'm convinced that we should, we've talked about awe and doing aerobics every day, to being a little bit blown away somewhere. I sit in the city and I can do the same thing in the city in that ecosystem as I can in the woods. One has just been tainted and one is still trying to untaint. But why? What's really going on behind all this? And I've kind of put my best foot forward in the hokey pokey of life of making a stab at this, and I'm going to reiterate some of that, because it seems to me more and more that there is a why of it. Now, why is there a why? Well, that's a whole different order of whyness and WTFing. But we're going to try and touch it next week. Till then, my friends, blessings. And may your contemplative world be full and rich.